Hey everyone, welcome to Gadget Talk, the creative gadget cache show here on the Geocache Talk Network. Thank you for joining us. And tonight we have a special guest with us. As you can see, he's already on here. It's RoombaCats, and we're going to be going into some really cool. We're going to try and stump him tonight, or he's going to stump us tonight with some stuff and then maybe some rocks. But also joining with us, of course, as always, is Bounce Bounce, or better known as Chad. Hey
Yes,
Chad, how you doing tonight?
good. How about you, Derek? Thanks for introducing us there. Doing
No
the opening.
problem.
Yeah, tonight I'm so excited about tonight. Yes, we these stumps. I've been looking forward to this show for a while. The stump and the rock. I've seen the pictures of these; they're amazing. So, I think this is gonna be awesome. So, really
Right,
excited.
right.
Yeah,
But
it's great
before
to be
we
here.
get in, thanks for being here with us, Doug.
Uh-uh.
But before we get into that, we gotta take care of our sponsors real quick. So we're gonna go ahead and take care of that. If you would like to become a patron, click on the Become a Patron link on the front page of the Geocache Talk website, or head over to patreon.com/Geocache Talk for more details. Patrons get the now famous blackout coins and other geocaching items during the year. Support levels start as low as the Bison Tube level, which is only $3 a month.
Logwork, the creators of the fantastic logbook, made with genuine Write in the Rain paper. The logbook's designed for the micro containers of the present and future, geared towards the hider who'd rather go caching than doing cache maintenance. Find them at logwork.com. That's logwerk.com.
All right, now that's taken care of. Now we get to have fun.
Yes. But real quick, first, before we jump into looking at these stumps, last week at the end of the show, I mentioned I would show one of the builds that I did with that container we made last week. And real quick here, let's just pop onto this camera. We made the ammo can acrylic containers last week. This is a key station, kind of like what I mentioned. Sorry, that's backwards. There, so it's labeled like every geocache should be. When you open it up, it's your pretty standard key station. It tells you right here that you need to put it up there. Find the correct key to access the logbook. And then here you have, obviously, the acrylic box that we made last week. All I did on this box was I built it and took it to the table saw and actually just set the fence and cut it around and added a new front to it. So pretty simple. And then I actually, if I would have done it in half, I would have two acrylic boxes for an ammo can. So again, have the keys in here on a cable, and you'd have to find the right key. There's a little red herring to this one. So none of the keys actually fit the lock. So you got to find the right key. So on this one here, the right key is actually if you pull off the logo or the instruction book and you run it along the front, it actually opens up with an RFID card reader, and that's how you get to the logbook. So real quick, I mentioned last week that I would show that. So that is done. If you have any questions about that, let me know, and we can send you any links to any parts or anything you may need. And now we can go back to Doug and get going on this awesome build.
And that's absolutely evil. Now, before we get going, we had a question. This kind of runs over to the last geocache talk. If you make a fake rock so heavy that you need a lever to access the log, does that make it a gadget cache? Yes.
Yeah, I think it's officially a gadget cache.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to show you a rock. It's about 2 feet in diameter. It's a fake rock, but I actually am using it in a couple of spots. So yeah, it's
awesome.
pretty heavy. Yeah.
Right.
So one thing I've found while I love to make gadget caches, but I don't like losing them to muggles. And so I thought, how could I hide these gadget caches and make them concealed? And so one thing I've realized is concealment is king. You have to actually hide it and make it look like something that belongs there, especially where I'm at. I live in a high desert, which is it's in Southern California, where I'm not that far from Los Angeles, but there's not a lot of trees around here. So I have to figure out a way of hiding my gadget caches. And the way I do that is making fake rocks. So this is very much, it came from a real rock As you can see, it's actually hollow and behind it. It's made out of cement. This is actually concrete. Cost me about $3. And I'm going to teach you, one, how to make fake rocks like this so you can hide your caches underneath there. You can actually hide an ammo can under here. And number two is how to make fake rocks, or I mean stumps. So you can see this looks like a regular stump. I've got this one just like this right now. It's right next to a thoroughfare. No one's actually discovered it. It's a travel bug hotel, and inside it, inside the lid, inside this travel bug hotel is a container like this. Let's see what I do with it. Anyways, there's a container that fits down in here and actually just drops right down in here. So you can see this is empty, right? So, okay, so this is a great way to hide something. And how did I get a concrete stump? This is made out of concrete and PVC tubing. It's about 6 inches in diameter. So I'm going to teach you how to make one of these. And I think you'll really find it interesting, especially if you're a maker like me, somebody who just loves to make things and, kind of likes to just, make it look like it belongs. I mean, I get no bigger thrill than that. And so I just love to make stuff. And so that actually came from another log. So I had to make my own stump first. And so I'm going to tell you about how to make a stump as the first thing before I go into rocks. But let me go back to rocks real quick. So you don't have to make really big rocks like this. You can make much smaller rocks. And so if you find a rock you want to make, I mean, look at this little guy right here. So this little piece of PVC piping under here, and you can unscrew it. And so I use this as a spoiler. If I have a really hard cache, I want to make sure somebody finds my cache, but also is able to solve it if I have a gadget cache. So I will put one of these real close by so that if they can't figure it out, they can still find this baseball rock size rock. And there's actually a geocaching logo that's kind of designed right into the surface of the rock so they can spot it. So some of my really difficult geocaches, I want to make sure they go home and have a good time. I don't want them to leave and have to come back and find it. So I'll say, hey, go 20 feet north and look for a baseball sized rock. This is what you'll find. This will help you find the cache. So there's all kinds of rocks that I've made. This is one of the first ones I made. It's a rock. It has the little geocaching logo right here. I don't know if you can see it. But I have little teeny rocks. But if you have a rock, that's all, and you need you need to hide something small like this. Or if you have a decorative rock garden somewhere, it could be in the middle, well, not in the middle of the highway, but if somewhere that you want to hide something, you could also make a rock it looks exactly like one of the other rocks. And you can see this one. This was a decorative hide that I found, and it was just in a supermarket. And there was just a bunch of other rocks exactly like this one. This has right here, and if you can kind of see it, it's just a Tupperware in there. So I just pushed it down in there, let it harden, and it looked just like the other rocks. And I even put a little geocaching logo on here. One of the first rocks I ever made. So anyways, it doesn't have to be a big rock. It can be a little rock. I would start with that just to let you know, and you can try all kinds of things. In fact, they're so convincing when you use a real rock from the area you're in, you'll probably set it down, turn around, and you'll lose it. And that was what happened to me on one of the first ones. I thought, that's a bad idea, because if I can't even find it, neither are they. But they still found it. It was amazing. So anyways, back to the stump. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about how to make a stump. So I've got some pictures that I'm going to show you. And so that looks like a real stump right there, right? Okay, so how did I do it? So one of the first things I did was I needed to make my own stump. Now, being kind of a creative, makey guy that I am, I decided that rather than try to find one, because I couldn't find one anywhere that I really liked, I needed about this dimension right here. So I went and I created my own. So Derek, if you could show us like stump picture number 1, let's take a look at that.
To the one with the pledge.
There we go. So this is a picture of one of the stumps that I made. This is the one I have out there right now. So go to the next one there. Okay, so keep going. Okay, we're back. So this is the rocks right here. So
yeah, that's where we started off on that. Which part are you wanting to show? I only have those other two stumps.
This is the stump. Yeah, this is great. Okay, so this is a mold that I made from making the actual stump. So what I did is, go ahead. And so what I did is I created my own stump. I took a piece of PVC tubing, just like this, is 6 inches. I took some paper mache and I started making kind of like a surrounding for this. I created these little lobes that you would typically see on a tree stump. And then I covered it with real bark that I found. So I found rotting logs and I could just pull the bark right off of them. And I glued it on with hot glue. And so once I did that, I could use some latex that I could put on there, and I could create a stump. And so let me show you what that looks like. So after I created this stump, I made this mold. So this is the mold, and there's actually a part that I have not removed out here from here. I'm going to show you how to do it. So this is the first time I've actually pulled this mold off of this stump. So it might take a second. It's really stuck. So you can see that this mold has created the same, because there's so many little nooks and crannies on here, it doesn't want to come off easily, but you can see that I just made a duplicate of the stump that I was starting out with. If I can get the last bit of it off. There we go. So there's the mold. All right. That's the mold right there. So once you get this part of it, it is so easy to make another stump. And so you can just keep making a whole bunch of them. And so that's the hardest part of getting to this point right here.
Now, Doug, on the picture that we saw earlier, you had the pledge. Now, what do you use the pledge for?
So the pledge is actually a release agent, and so it works really good so that helped me take this off. And so if you actually spray wax onto the mold before you pour the concrete into it, it'll help come off quite a lot easier. And that's one of the little tips and tricks that I wanted to share with you when you're making a stump. And so I started out with a stump like I said. So now I use something called liquid latex. Let me put this somewhere. So liquid latex is something you can purchase online. It's used for mold making. As you can see, it takes a couple of layers to put on here. And so it's about the consistency of clam chowder, I guess. I'm trying to think of a good example for frosting. And so basically it's kind of the same color as this. And you just put it all over the stump if you find one that you want to make. And just keep putting it on until it's a good thickness. And then you can pull it off, and then you can keep casting a whole bunch of stumps just like it. So
how long does it take it to dry?
So you want to put on about 6 layers. So it takes about, depending on how warm of a day it is, it takes about an hour or so to dry. And then I just put on rubber gloves, and I just put it on with my hands and just smeared it around. And that really helps. And so this stuff is stuff you can buy online. It's called liquid latex mold making material. I get mine from Silpack. That's here. It's in Burbank. It's pretty close by. And this is what we use to to make these molds. And so I have always, there's something new out there that I've seen, and it is using a silicone caulking material, and they use soapy water to kind of create this non-stick ball of liquid liquid silicone. And I've seen rocks made out of it. I've always wanted to try it, but I've never done it. So I would like to try it and see if I can do it. I think it's probably a little cheaper, not by much. This is about $30 right here, and you can make a lot of parts for this.
Well, that's not bad for a mold that you can use over and over and over.
Not bad at all. Yeah.
No.
And so I wanted to. So go ahead and show some of the pictures, and we'll go into the rocks.
Okay. So here's the next one.
So what I'm using is something called plastic cement. Plastic cement is just the cement. It doesn't have rocks but it creates a very good material for making these concrete molds. And so it comes out actually once you mix it up, and it gets really creamy. And you can pour it into the mold, and it'll take that shape really well. So definitely use that. I mean, if you want to use some with rocks in it, it works as long as the rocks aren't too big. But the best way to do it is to use just the straight plastic cement. I don't know why it's called plastic, but that's what I use right there. It doesn't have any rocks in it. Now,
and how much does that bag cost?
That's about $3. Yeah, and that's like a 90-pound bag.
Wow.
It's really inexpensive to make these things.
Okay.
And so I've made a lot of them. So one thing that I use, and you can see, is that once I've mixed up the cement, is I'll add some chopped fiber. So this is just fiberglass. I'll put a kind of a handful of glass in there. You can buy this online as well. This is like 1 inch long chopped fiberglass. And what this does is it adds a lot of strength to the cement. So once it dries, you won't have to worry about it cracking or splitting or anything like that. And it really helps to keep it all together, because sometimes I've had some of my stumps have actually been picked up and flipped around, and they take a lot of abuse. And as long as I can keep them from cracking and everything like that, they'll last a really long time.
Nice. Now, real quick here, Doug. Pierre brought up a question, a point here on the brushing when you're putting in the silicone. It sounds like, or when you're brushing it on, get the stipple the brush will help get the rubber into the details of the wood, and it also helps push out the air bubbles.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. That's how I did it. That's one of the best ways. So basically, get it into everything. That's the best way to start out, and you're going to get the best detail if you do it that way. So that's a really good idea. And then I'll just slather it on with my gloves. So I'm just not afraid to just go in there and just put it on there. Yeah. And so we mixed up the cement. So when I'm pouring the mold for the stumps, I want it to be fairly runny, like the consistency of, I'm trying to think of, like a Yoplait yogurt, I guess. It's something you could pour, and because you're going to be lowering this PVC pipe down into the mold, and so you want it to just kind of push aside. So go ahead and take a look at the next picture. And so, so we're back at the rocks. Okay, so we're making them. So this is actually not for the stump. This is for the. So go to the next picture. Let me see if there's a stump in it.
The next picture's of you rolling it out.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's go to. Is there a blue tube in there?
No, I don't see a blue tube one on this one.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's go to the rocks then. All right. So kind of the same way that we make the stumps, we make the rocks. And so, hang on 1 second.
So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat right now, and we'll see those, and we'll get to those as well. Chad, this is really cool. This is making me really want to be able to do more of these different types of caches. What about you?
They're fun. Absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to get one done. I don't know about how do you want. I do have a question for you, and I was going to wait, but so in between, you said you had that stump that hasn't been found. Are you talking about by a cacher or by a muggle?
By Muggle, yeah.
Oh,
This
okay.
has been so effective at hiding these things that, and everybody knows a RoombaCat rock. It's another one of those RoombaCat rocks. There was one time where actually I used a smaller rock to hide a cache, and it kind of threw them a little bit because there's so many of them that they recognize them instantly. But that's the great thing about a gadget cache: easy to find, a little harder to get into. But it's like a beacon; they'll see it automatically. And I've actually had people running straight for a rock, knowing that's where my gadget cache was. So it's really great. It fools everybody, but caches who knows what a RoombaCat rocks looks like.
That's
Right.
great. I heard a story from West Virginia, Tim, about
Yeah.
a birdhouse, right?
That's
He had a
what I was
birdhouse. There was a birdhouse somewhere, and then he had a simple cache, I think it was, right? By
I
a
think so,
tree.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
something
and
like that.
people go straight to the birdhouse, and that's not the cache.
They don't even look at the coordinates, and they're like 100 yards off by where they're standing because that's not it. He actually put that out there as a red herring, the birdhouse.
Well, that's great. You get tunnel vision, right? You see it, and you're like, oh, that's it.
That's West Virginia Tim's birdhouse.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've had somebody literally just go sprinting towards us. I was helping them find some of my gadget caches, and so they caught on real quick that if there's a rock out there about this size, that's where it is.
Yeah.
So
And Dan did ask a quick question here. Will you please post a supply list in the show notes? Yes, we have already talked about that. We will have it up here soon in the next couple days.
Right. Yeah. So this is a rock that I've never that's still in the mold. I'm going to pull it out right now and I kind of show you what the mold is. You see some of this stuff. It's kind of weird. That's actually not latex. That's actually spray foam insulation. You can buy this at pretty much, and I'll tell you why in just a second why I put it out there. In fact, I'll show you why. So let's see if I can. Oh, that was actually easy. Hey, that's the magic of using wax or liquid flint. So you can see my mold here. So this was cast off of a real rock. You can kind of see the what it's like, and that's the latex you're seeing right there, and the surface of the rock came off pretty easy. But on the outside, so one of the troubles I've been having when I first started making these is how do I get it so that when I put some heavy cement into this thing, and I started out making pancakes with it, and we saw some pictures there. So we'd lay this in there, and it would start to sag and droop, and it wanted to move. And I was just so. Typically, what they use is fiberglass, like backs on it, so that it would fit the mold kind of thing, so that it doesn't move too much, and you get. But I didn't want to go through that much trouble. So what I did is after I made the mold, I sprayed it with this foam insulation. You can kind of see it kind of looks like a brain kind of thing, and you can see it. But the great thing about this stuff, and this is one of the great tips and tricks, is that it's really flexible and it stays on there. And so it's really great because you don't have to have a lot of materials or equipment to make these. So if you spray it with this, it'll hold its shape well enough after you take it off of the rock, or you put it on while the mold is still on the original rock, and you can pull it off and you'll get something like this. It'll keep its shape, and so that when you can put an ammo can underneath your next rock or anything, it works great. So I just wanted to share that. This is one of the best ideas I've had so far when it comes to RoombaCat rocks. So
yeah, I was just about to ask when you did the foam if it was on the rock itself when you did that, or did you do it after? And you answered it right before I was going to ask it.
Yeah.
Right before you pull it out. Yeah. This stuff is
good.
great. It's flexible and it stays on there. This stuff sticks to everything. So it's really good. So that
I would have thought that the
So
spray foam would have broken off, right? Because it usually gets hard and stiff, and I would have thought that the flexing of it would have broken it or made it crack, but evidently it doesn't.
Believe it or not, that's what I was expecting too. But it stayed. That mold is a couple of years old, and it's still really flexible. Yeah, it's amazing. So I just go around it in like a circle and just start adding it to it, and it keeps its shape really well. So if you want to make molds that are big, RoombaCat rock molds, you can hide ammo cans under there. That's a good way to do it. It really helps. Hey, this came out pretty good. This is the first time I've seen it since it came out of the mold. That looks like a real rock.
Yep. So, Para Rabbit has. Do you brush dish soap on the rock before brushing on the latex as a release agent?
I think that would actually work. What I use instead is the pledge. So I would just spray it with the wax, let it dry, and it makes a really nice film on the actual rock that you're molding, taking a mold from, and it'll make it so much easier. Otherwise, the latex sticks to it, kind of not super well. You can still remove it, but it makes it so much easier to remove. And you don't have to worry about any part of that latex staying behind on there and creating a hole or anything like that. But make sure you use 3 or 4 coats to make sure that when that comes off, that it's going to come out in a nice solid mold. Okay. So
awesome.
Yeah. So there's, like I said, you can make any size rock. So if you want to start out with some smaller rocks, I would do that. There are videos online on YouTube that use the silicone mold method, and so they end up taking dish soap in a bucket, I guess, and water, and they just kind of drizzle this silicone into it with a caulking gun, and they just kind of like toss it around into a ball and then just let it form. Like I said, I'd love to try that. I haven't tried that yet, but I'm sure it works. In fact, I know somebody who did do it, and that rock came out amazing.
That's cool. I'd like to see that. So we'll look for links as well for some of those, and we'll have those in the show notes when we get them up in the next day or so.
Yeah, awesome. So that's those are the rocks. So I'm going to show you my biggest rock. Be right back.
All right.
Okay. So we'll have to get to some of the questions here, Hugh, when he gets back on some of these. So like to go over painting as well, right? Or however you finished them off.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So
okay. So this is my biggest mold right here. You can see how big this is. It actually hides a couple of caches that I have that are pretty big. And it works great. It's invisible. This isn't a challenge to go find it, and muggle my caches. But if here in Southern California, these work great. You can see how big this is. It's about 2 feet in diameter. I just found this rock out in the wilderness and decided to take a mold of it. When you take the latex off of it, it doesn't leave anything behind. So it works great. You don't have to worry about that too much. And so here's the rock. You can see how big it is.
Wow. Have you ever had anybody message you and said, we were sitting on this big rock, and then we'd realize that we're sitting on the what was hiding the actual cache?
Actually, I have. Everyone has kind of figured out in my description. I'll say you're looking for a very large rock, and it's under the rock. So I don't want to make it too hard to find, but they do sit on it to solve the problems. And so early on, I learned that that's one of the reasons I need to make them as strong as possible. You can see this rock right here. It's about 3/4 of an inch thick. That's pretty thick. That isn't right there, but as a whole, it's pretty thick. And the reason I make it that heavy and add the chopped fibers to it is because when they put it back, sometimes they'll stand on it to kind of pack it down so that the edge of the rock line is submerged in the sand. And so I just want to make these as beefy as possible. That way I don't have to go out and rescue it, because I think a broken rock would be kind of a giveaway that there's something else underneath it. Yeah. I have had a 4-wheel drive go right over one and not break the rock. I could see it had recently rained. There was lots of mud around, and I could see it must have been a Jeep or something go right over I could see the tread go right over my rock, and it still stood up to that. So that's another thing, is just make it about anywhere from a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick. We can take a look at the picture in there where you can see where I'm using a roller pin, and I'm using, yeah, right there. So I'm using, what's that called? The baking material. It's
It's parchment paper.
Parchment paper. Yeah, that stuff works really well. And so this is my wife helping me. My wife actually makes way better rocks than I do. She's really talented. She's a partner in crime when making RoombaCats. She does a really great job. So we're rolling it about 3/4 of an inch thick, or kind of a 1/2 inch thick in this end. So you can take a look at the next picture, and you can see kind of the results of that. And some of the great things about that is that you can pick it up from underneath, and you can plop it right into the mold and form it. And so one of the problems we've had in the past is that we'll have thin spots. And so that's one of the tricks is use a rolling pin, get a nice consistent thickness to it, and then drop it into your mold. That will really help. And then just kind of smooth it around. Do we have any more pictures after that?
No, I don't have any more on that one.
Oh, okay.
So,
right.
real quick on coloring them, can you add concrete dye to it? Have you ever tried to add the concrete dye?
Yes.
Change the color?
For this rock right here, let's see, we move this.
About how heavy are those two?
Yeah,
this is probably 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds.
Okay.
It's not too bad at all.
No.
So this one right here was made using concrete stain. It's basically a bottle of I think it's just brown, and we just added it to the concrete, and so the concrete dries a very light gray, and so that color really starts to come out later on. And so it starts out a little darker, but it lightens up, and so you can see there's even kind of a slight red tint to it, which matches a lot of the other rocks that we have in the area. So yeah, definitely get some concrete coloring. You can get that at your hardware store. They almost always have it in the concrete section. There's many different colors. There's the buff color, which is a light brown. There's black and kind of a reddish brown, and then terracotta and that kind of thing. Definitely do that. So this has not been painted. This is how it came out. Looks pretty good. But what I do is I study rocks. And that makes me a rockologist. And so I will take a look at what makes a rock look like a rock. You know, what's like, why would somebody do that? Well, so here's one thing. There's bird poo on rocks. And so I'll take white paint and I'll drop little drops on there to make it look like a bird's been around there. Another thing is you'll see little scuffs where rocks have tumbled or been scraped, and so I'll add those with paint. And I use something like a dye or a dry brush paint. So basically, I'll take a big paintbrush and I'll first do a wash on it. So just kind of a runny or enough to add a little bit of color, like when you're watercoloring. And then I'll take a dry brush. So I'll take some different colors, and it won't paint like if you're going to paint your house. You want just slight. You want it to apply just a slight color to it. And so as you put multiple colors on there, so I'll do light brown, and in some cases black. As you add layers to it, the better it looks. And so it generates this 3D effect in that rocks have different colors, and if they're not always symmetrical too. So that's one thing I found also is that I tried it looked like a patchwork of paint that I had added, just dry brushing it on. So just, here, that kind of thing. And you could tell there was something odd about it because that just isn't found in nature. But like something like here, you would see a darker color right here because it's a combination of different kinds of dirt kind of thing. So yes, I definitely look at rocks. I try to interpret what makes them look like a rock, and then I try to make my own rocks look just like it.
Right. So up in Northern California, there's a lot of lichen and moss on the rocks. How would you add that to it?
Oh, that's a good one. Just my first thought is just the hobby store train set or the rail what do they call it, the scale model trains
Right.
that, I would probably go and do that. That's a good question. I've never had to do that because it's not that wet around here.
Right.
But I would definitely try to do that if I lived in that kind of a place. So I haven't done that, but yeah, I'd probably try paint on that. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, that would be a lot of fun to try. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably what I would use.
Yeah, and if you didn't mix, I think the dye all together, right, it wouldn't have a consistent color. You actually may have some, off colors. I think that'd be pretty
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I've got a couple of rocks out there just like that, and it has actually patches of this dye around here, and it looks completely natural. So what you're shooting for is realism, and so sometimes you'll see oxidized metals in certain rocks, and you'll see these patches of kind of a yellow or patches of brown or areas where different minerals react differently with the environment, and so they will change different colors. Also, lots of little black specks I noticed in these, as well as just abrasion marks on it, and, especially in corners and stuff like that. Especially when you have smaller rocks that are getting kicked around and run over by cars and rolled around down mountains and everything, you'll see abrasions on there, and there would just be little lighter spots, especially in sharp corners, that kind of thing. So definitely pay attention to those. Kind of hit those a little bit with a little bit of white or a lighter color, so as if it was actually scraped up a little, and that sells it completely. Don't forget the bird poo.
So how do these do in forest fires? I would imagine that they would be fairly safe.
They
Your
have.
cache would be.
They survived. Yes, I've had two go through a fire area, and it wasn't touched. Everything underneath it. It was black around the edges, especially kind of on the undercut areas. It made it look all the better because it was just a brush fire in that area. And the best part of this happened locally here, not far from me. And there was a homeless camp that sprung up right there next to that rock. I have a picture of one of these people sitting on my rock with the geocache beneath it. And they have no idea that it's there, but it's just because it looked like it had been through a fire. It looked like it belonged, and nobody was any of the wiser. They eventually moved on, so everyone was able to find that cache. But that was one of the best compliments ever. That somebody literally lived right there, was probably putting their feet up on it, and they never even noticed it. So that's some of the great things about concealment.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and adding more camouflage to it too.
Yeah, homeless people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people live in California, well, Oregon and Washington now, but now that you have these, or if you make this, your cache has another aspect to it. It's actually fire rated, right?
Oh yeah, it works great. Yeah. All my bird houses haven't survived it, but all my rocks, they're intact completely. In fact, it makes the rocks look even better.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
Yeah, the more they're out there in the nature, the more they weather, and the more they'll look more natural too.
That's a really good point. When you paint your rock, maybe it won't look quite as natural as you think it is. In fact, I've put some rocks out there that I was just like, yeah, I should have spent a little more time on that. But once they're out there for about a month or 2 months, they look like they completely belong. I don't know how they transform like they do, but they become part of that desert. They actually become part of that. I don't know if it's just sand and dust is infiltrating it or something, but that it fades perfectly. And after about a month and a half, it is undetectable unless you knew it was there. Yeah, it's really amazing.
So would you put those actually after you make the mold, before you put it out? Would you put it like in your backyard maybe to go ahead and get that weathering effect on it, or would you just go ahead and put them out in the wild?
I have done that actually. I have a berm. It's a very steep berm. It's so steep you can barely walk on it, but it's full of rocks and it's full of these rocks, and so that's a really great place because sometimes they'll get sprinkler spray on them, which here we have such hard water in California that you get kind of that water effect of the what do they call that, the scale, I think, or the lime on it, and as water kind of drips from it, Yeah. So what's happening is it'll take sand out of the air and it will pool in certain areas. That's another trick I learned. That I'm glad you brought it up. I will take a container of water about this big. I'll fill it up with water and I'll take a few drops of light brown paint, mix it up, and it's really watery. I'll douse it, let it sit there for a while, and let the runny water brown kind of just sit there and pool in certain areas. That is a great way to make it look like it belongs, because in nature it's pulling dust and sand out of the air and it's settling on the rocks and it's settling in these little spots. And maybe that's probably what it is. Why it looks so good after being out in the desert for a couple of times, for a couple of months, I mean, because that's what makes it look all the better. Yeah, nature just has a way of camouflaging itself.
Right. So, what is the funniest? I mean, you're talking about the homeless people living on your rock and different aspects of it. What would be probably one of the? Have you had any of your rocks get stolen or anything like that, or you haven't lost anything?
That's a good question. They don't steal. They'll steal the cache, but they won't steal the rock. I don't know why. I've had in 6 years, I've had 3 caches that have been muggled, and they were all in very high traffic. You know, it's just 3 feet from a sidewalk kind of thing. But I find out it's missing, and I'll go look for it, and the rock is still there. I don't know why they wouldn't want to take the rock too. I mean, they're not light, but they're not that heavy. I mean, I've never had anybody say I couldn't pick it up. And another thing I look for in a rock is, you can see this little ledge right here where my hand is. I try to look for something with an undercut, because this really helps to flip them over. And so that really helps. One thing I've noticed, though, is people will tend to flip the rock over, and if it's in a high traffic area, people will see that. And so one thing I've learned is just kind of move it back a little bit behind some bushes or whatever out in the desert where I live. And as long as they don't see it from the road, they'll never find it. But if you're a geocacher and you're looking for a RoombaCats rock, you'll find it right away. You'll come right up on it. But it's kind of funny, when I go out looking for my own caches to check on them and make sure they're in good shape, I typically will not see my own rock until I'm 20 feet from it. It's kind of funny. I mean, they really blend in. But like I said, concealment is way better than impenetrability. Is that a word? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And that's just really, I couldn't have said it. I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, concealment is king. I mean, that's the lesson I learned right from the get-go. Oh, and this actually is a replacement for a travel bug hotel that I have in Solvang, California. It's a beautiful Bavarian town. It is right next to a hole in the fence that somebody created just to ease moving through an area. And it is literally 1 foot from that hole in the fence. It gets tons of traffic, never once found. And this isn't a challenge, but it is that convincing that they haven't yet found it. And so it basically just has a little nail in the top of the stump, and it has the container just attached to the bottom of it. It's that simple. I've got another one that I'm working on right now that you go over to a rock, rotate the rock, and this goes ding. There's a little bell, a bicycle bell in there with a little spring-loaded latch. It's just a gate latch under there, and it pops up. And so I realized that I needed to make a bicycle bell ding, because it's about 20 feet away from where the actual stump is. And if they didn't hear it ding, they might just go, and just leave, with it. That's
cool. Now on that one there, what is the lid that you have on that? Is that another mold, or was that another actual piece of wood, or what is that?
The first stump I made, let me show you. Sorry, I got to pop up screen just for 1 second. It's right here.
That's a great question, Derek. That's exactly what I was thinking. The same thing.
Yeah,
if you actually cut a piece of wood like that and you let it weather, it would crack almost like a real stump. But you'd have to enforce, I think, the bottom.
Right. And so this is the first stump I made. You can see that I just poured it upside down. And so what I did is I left a little bit of a recess right here, and I cut a piece of a log like this, just like this one, and I glued it to the top. The only problem is over time, the weather would get to the adhesive and it would start to come off. And so people started realizing it's like, oh, okay, that must be the cache, and start yanking on this veneer that I'd added to the top of it. And so that's why I decided to come up with a way of making it so that it would come up, the whole top would come off. And so that really helped. But you can see again, as I poured the cement into the mold, all I did is just put together some PVC pipe and just dumped it in there. And you can see that it just comes off just like that. And you can get in there.
Yeah, as long as no one over tightens that. That's one of the issues I have with those. I have a couple with those lids, and people over tighten them. I'm like, you don't.
Yeah.
You do a couple of threads.
That's one of the problems. Yeah, people would tighten it too tight, and it just wouldn't open again.
Yeah, I've had one that's like that as well.
So you're doing 4-inch? Is that 4-inch PVC you're using there?
I'm using 6-inch.
6-inch, okay.
Just because I wanted the biggest size I could find. But you can make anything, especially if you're living in a forested area where there's lots of trees. You could just go out there and take a mold of a stump. It would take no more than a day. Just go visit it a couple of times during the day and put a little bit more on there until it's thick enough, and then you can start making your own stumps. It's a great way to hide things. You don't have to dig a hole or anything like that unless you wanted to or you have permission to do that. It's above ground, and people really enjoy it. It's a very unique kind of hide, and so yeah, definitely if you're ambitious enough, try and make one of these. You'll really like it, and I think others will really like it as well.
Yeah, I was coming up with an idea as we're sitting here that I would like to try, and it's going to be a combination of a stump and a rock. And just like the other one with the RFID reader, you can embed that RFID card in a fake rock, and they'd have to take it around the stump somewhere until it pops the latch. Because those will read through, I believe, 1.5 to 2 inches of wood. So I don't know it's concrete, but it would. Yeah, I think it would read.
That's pretty cool.
So
that'd be a great way to do it.
Yeah.
So here's a question. Okay, so the lid that you have there is, you said it was wood. How do you keep it from falling in?
Oh yeah, and so I'm gonna kind of come up to the camera here real quick.
It looks like he has a bevel of his 6-inch pipe there exposed.
So when I put the pipe in, you can see right here, I cut a section of the pipe off about 1 inch thick, and I sectioned it into 4 sections so that, and then I glued it, I taped it in there with tape on the inside so that I can literally pry these out. Oh, hey, you know what? I'm going to try and pull the one I have out right here.
Okay. So did you cut that piece of 6-inch, that little bit you had there, out after you molded it so you can mold to it? And then would you use like a Dremel to go inside and cut it out?
Yeah, so I started out, so let's see if this will work. This will be fun. So there's actually cement on here, but right below it, this is the one I just pulled out of the mold. And so I'm going to bash out, there's a plywood top on here. And so I'm going to see if I can actually pull those little sections out so you can see how it worked. So let me show it to you beforehand. So it looks like it's just solid concrete, but that tube is actually in there and pressing up against it. So here goes nothing. This is how I did my last one. There we go. That was fun.
So you use duct tape to go over the top there?
Yeah. So
a piece of wood.
So this is a piece of wood that I put over it. It's really dusty. And so I just put little screws in it. And so let me show you. Let me pull off some of this tape and you can see what I did. You can see it a little clearer. So this is a really good way of doing it. So it's like, how do you get the top? So you can see that tube goes all the way up to the top here. But so how did I do it? Let me see if I can see there it is. Yeah. So I come up to the camera here. I'm getting all dusty. So I sectioned this. And so let's see. Here's my light here.
Okay, yeah, I see it there.
Yep.
right there. So that's a little gap in there, and so that helps me. So let me pull it out of there. So take just 1 second. Let me find it.
So for those who are listening to the
Right.
podcast and not watching it, he's taking it. I don't know if it's a screwdriver or a chisel, and he's pulling out a section of the pipe.
Yeah. So let me pull it out. So I put it. So it's just taped onto the top of the original tube, and it's about 1 inch of the tube. Let's see if I can get it out. Here it comes. Oh, there we go.
It's always harder when you're trying to do this live, right, Chad?
Oh, yes. That someone mentioned earlier, have him stand on one of his rocks. I was like, nah, you don't want to do that because that will be the time that you have
Then
your
it
failure.
breaks.
You've never had an issue before, and it will break.
So these are the little pieces that all come out. You can see how they just kind of. I just taped them on the inside of the tube, and you can pull each one of these out. There's another, so they come out pretty easy after you get the first one out, and so that's how you do it. And so what you end up with. Let's see what I do with the other. Oh, here it is.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chad. Oh, there it is.
And you get that recess right there. And here's and this is actually PVC right here. So when you put that in, it can rest on it right there. There you go. No problems.
That's really cool.
So I know that, they do have these in California, but Tap Plastics does carry, I think, most of the material to make these.
Yeah. That's where I go to a mold making shop.
Yeah. That's what Tap Plastics does. It's where I buy my pieces of acrylic to cut off pieces. I've also, for a pipe like that, 6-inch pipe, 4-inch pipe, drainage pipe, you can get bigger. If you see a place that's doing construction, they'll have cutoff pieces that they're going to throw away. If you just go in there and say, "Hey, can I have these?" They usually give them to you, right? Otherwise, they have to pay to dispose of them.
Yeah, I think I bought a 2-foot long section out of just my local hardware store. I don't know if you have a Lowe's, but here on the West Coast, it's just a hardware store that they use it for drainage, I think. But it was about $15 for 2 feet, and I've made three stumps out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. The Home Depot here has them. I just bought some the other day actually for my koi pond, and it was 6-inch, 2-foot, but it was ABS is what they had, but it was $18.
Yeah, anything's good. Yeah,
it would work.
So one little detail I did on this is how do I make this look like somebody had cut down the tree? I took epoxy, add a little bit of brown paint, just enough to color it like the color of honey, and I would drizzle it into the crack. Excuse me. Drizzle it into the cracks so that it looked like tree sap had started to ooze out of the these cracks in here to give the effect that it still was fresh when it was cut. Worked great along with this, so bird poo and epoxy. Yeah, that works great. So I just took a little spoon and just kind of drizzle it around the edges too. Sells it every time.
Nice.
Yeah, it's always in those details that is going to sell these
That's
caches.
That's the weird thing about. Well, it's not the weird thing. People notice things that don't look right. They couldn't tell you what it is, but they know when something doesn't look quite right, and they will zero right in on it. And so it is those details that really sells it, and it's why I've got this one out there for almost 6 years now, and only geocachers know. So yeah, it's really a lot of fun to make these, especially when they can survive. I've got a lot of caches like that that are in areas where school kids are walking by every day, and so I love the challenge of making things like that so that they look like they belong, but they're actually geocaches, and people love to find those as well. So it's not just the adventure of making something like this and owning it, but it's also the fun of reading the logs that people have and how much fun they had finding it. And it's a different container than they've ever seen. So that's always a lot of fun and just kind of keeps me going.
Yeah, I can't recall finding something like this. This is
No, I
a
haven't
great
either.
creative cache. I definitely
Yeah.
would give it a favorite point.
Yes, I mean and even if it wasn't a gadget and he had this really cool container like this and hidden in plain sight and people are like you said walking by it, using it as a footrest, doing all these different things on this thing, and it's actually a fake log or rock, and I just think that's really cool.
Yeah. It adds a lot to the game.
We have a quick question here for
Yep.
you.
Oh, we both hit it at the same time.
Go ahead, Derek.
Okay. Have you wrapped the concrete touching side of the removable shim pieces with parchment paper to make removing easier? Just wondering if that would work.
That's a really good idea. I have used duct tape like that. That worked pretty well. It made kind of a pretty good non-stick surface. One thing, that's one thing that I need to bring up. So the reason I'm replacing this cache is because the concrete started to dry out and the tube started migrating up. So the tube was actually sticking out of the top of the cache because the concrete had shrunk a little bit. And so it wasn't staying put. And so one thing that you should always remember is just put some little short screws in the PVC tube. And then when you're casting the concrete around it, it has something to grab onto. And that's the only reason I've had to replace this cache is because the tube started to come up out of the log. This bright turquoise colored tube.
Yeah.
And
That's a good point. I mean, everything expands and contracts at different temperatures, right, and different rates.
Yeah,
so that's a good point. Putting those screws in there it's not giving it rebar, but it's giving it something to grab so it doesn't quite expand.
yeah,
And hopefully it won't crack the concrete, depending on how much, because your plastic's going to expand more than your concrete.
Yeah, that's another great reason to use the
Fiberglass.
Fiberglass, because it holds it all together. So the thing about concrete, it's great in compression. And for you engineering people, it's great when you're squeezing it down, but when you're trying to stretch it out, it'll crack pretty easy. And so that's where the fiberglass reinforcement really works. And you can buy fiberglass reinforced concrete. You can actually buy it like that. There already has the fiberglass in it. These are used for making like stepping stones and other things like that for casting for items around your house, but that take a lot of wear and tear that's pretty thin. And so you can actually buy it like that already. So if you look for, let's say, fiberglass reinforced, so FGC something, fiberglass reinforced concrete, you can probably find it in your hardware store as well. So you don't have to go buy extra fiberglass. You can just buy it ready-made like that, and that works pretty well. I've done that; it works good.
Yeah, I know we've used that quite a bit in pouring slabs.
Oh yeah.
And you have the fiberglass pieces sticking up, and so you go back and burn them off.
Yeah,
Exactly. That was a question I actually had. Was if you might have went over it, I might have missed it. Was how much concrete per part did you put in versus fiberglass? The chopped fiberglass.
So in the picture, I just took like a handful, just about as much as I can hold in my hand, for about this much concrete, and just threw it in there. So it has quite a bit in there because as this plastic tends to expand a little bit more than other materials, probably expands more than concrete, and so I wanted to just give it a little more extra strength. So I added a little bit more concrete than I typically do. That way it keeps it from cracking. Or if it does crack, it keeps it to a minimum and pieces won't come off. So the last one that I had out there for 6 months, I think it had one minor crack, like around here or something like that, but it still held together just fine if it wasn't for having nothing to grab onto.
It's one of those things you learn, you're building the cache and you don't think about that when you're building it, right? So
well, that's why I'm doing this. I want to give you all my secrets because I want everyone to do this too.
Yes.
All right, so here's a question: when you hide it, do you mark it as an other container when you're actually publishing your cache?
That's a good question. That I've always done it as a traditional.
The size of it.
Oh, the size of it. Yeah, it's definitely. I don't know. I guess it's like whoever you think, for me, I always try to find like regular versions. Other is a little too mysterious for me. So I try to think if somebody else was trying to find it, what would they be looking for? So you could definitely do this as other if you want to make it a little trickier to find. And to be honest, yeah, I could. This would definitely be a great hide in it just in itself for any kind of a log or cache. And this is a travel bug hotel, and it works great for that.
That's really cool.
So the concrete they'd be looking for complete would be GFRC.
Yep, GFRC. That's it. Yep.
So glass reinforced concrete.
Yeah, that has the fiberglass. And so, like I said, a lot of people make pavers out of that. Anything that's going to be like that thick and have lots of people walking on it and wheelbarrows and all that stuff, you definitely want to have something that can handle that kind of thing. So that's why they reinforce it.
Right.
Same
And
with
we had another tip. Don't forget to wear your gloves when casting. Fiberglass splinters hurt.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I always wear the rubber gloves because it'll really dry out your hands. And you'll feel it for like a day if you don't. Even though you wash your hands will just feel they're like there's something on there and you can't get rid of it. So it's very well, it's not caustic, but it's best to keep that liquid concrete off of your hands. Once it dries, it's fine.
Right.
That's really good advice. That's another tip I should share. Yes.
Yes. Well, I have really enjoyed this tonight and seeing how easy this actually is, because it looks something that would be really complicated. And to me, it's like, well, I maybe have to go and do another build just to hide this, because this is an element where either rocks or tree stumps that you can pretty much hide anywhere if you make a mold out of it. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it was interesting, easier than I thought. Easy enough. I think I could probably make it.
Just do it. Make some rocks. Go mold. If you find a stump, go mold it and go try it. It'll work great. You'll love it.
That's awesome. So, do you want to, just because it's getting here to be a little bit late, do you want to go ahead and let everybody know where you're located and what your cache name is, and maybe how they can find some of your caches? So
you can see on my name there, it's RoombaCats, ROOMB cats, CATS. So it's a husband and wife team. My wife does a great job at making the rocks. I was making the stumps. We're both into geocaching. So if you look for RoombaCats when you're doing your filters, you can find my caches. You'll find most of them in the Palmdale, Lancaster area. So it's north of Los Angeles, about 30 miles, I think, or probably a bit more than that. But if you come, all of my caches are located in one, or most of them are located in one location. And so you can find 50 caches because the next one's 528 feet away. And so I have them in one location. It's a great place to go. So please come up, find my caches. I think you'll really like them. If you've seen my other show on the Gadget Talk, you will have seen a lot of the caches I've done. And so, yes, please. You can also find me on actually, I just started doing TikTok. I have one video on there. If you look up RoombaCats, you'll find it there. Under Facebook, you'll find my name, Doug Ross. So Doug is in past tense of dig, D-O-U-G and Ross. Dress for less. I don't know. But go ahead and look for me there and just look under geocaching and you'll find me. I have a lot of my spoilers on there. You can take a look and see them and see how I make them. I love it. I love to watch other people take my ideas and make their own cache out of them. I absolutely love seeing that. I am so flattered that somebody liked my caches enough to try to create another one, especially if they take the idea and make it even better. So if you like my caches, feel free to make one just like it. On Instagram, it's RoombaCats, all lowercase. So you can find a lot of my geocaches there. I still have probably 20 or 30 videos I still need to add there, but there's quite a few of them there. So I think you'll really like them. Please check it out. And please tell me if you want to make one yourself. I'll do everything I can to help you.
That's great. And, you will help people so much. You'll actually do a podcast showing how to make it with Parts List, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get that part list up in the next day or so as soon as we get it,
yeah.
and we'll put that out there on there.
Right.
and
I'll try to make a video on the step by step for making one of these, as well as a rock.
That'll be cool.
Yeah.
Great. So Dan wants to know if there's any fake rocks in Colorado. I'm thinking you haven't hidden any there, right?
No.
That might be tough. There's a lot of rocks in Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be pretty tricky. Yeah.
So great. Well, I missed your cat tonight. Last time it was all over the table.
I had to lock my door. She came in like twice. Yeah.
So if you do one of these rocks, of course, tag Doug in this, and then also tag us at Geocaching Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to see what you do, see how you're hiding them up. If you have any other things that you want us to talk about, send us an email at gadgettalkpodcast@gmail.com. And like I said, we'll get the parts list up in the next day or so. That way you can see the list of what you're going to need for this. And also, don't forget we have a build coming up at the end of this month. And Chad, what are we doing? I know we haven't completely decided, but what can we give them a little bit of a hint of what we are looking at doing?
I have a couple different options depending on what parts come in first. But it's going to be some sort of decipher using maybe the container we built last week in an ammo can. Now, of course, if we use the container, the acrylic one, you can build that on a birdhouse, anything you want. We're just trying to make it, we're putting in something that typically it's easier to hide than a birdhouse.
Right.
But, again, we're doing that. And then, that's at the end of this month.
There may be something happening in the middle of this month, a special gadget talk.
There may
We're waiting on some confirmations.
Yeah, exactly. Be a really good one. Be on a off day from our normal cache talk, or gadget talk. But, hopefully we'll have confirmation on Sunday and the Gary and Memphis. Yeah, thanks. Can mention, I was trying not to say his first name, but Gary in Memphis can sit there and talk, tell you guys about it. It'll be fun. And again, if you guys like the show, make sure you hit the like button at the bottom of the page here and follow us, subscribe to the podcast. Now, we're part of the Geocache Talk Network. There's lots of different geocaching podcasts for every need or anything you like in geocaching. So make sure you check those out as well.
And they're also looking for some new blogs, and go to the website, geocachetalk.com, and see how you can submit that. Angie, who puts the blog out there, does a fantastic job, and we're always looking for different blogs. And hey, Doug, maybe that's what you could do. You could write a blog, a step on the blog about how you created these rocks, and maybe some of the funny stories, and that we could put up on the Geocache Talk Network
awesome.
blog.
I'd enjoy that.
So, but I want to thank you, Doug, for being with us tonight. So this has been, like I said, I really enjoyed this, and I did not realize exactly where you lived, and we'll talk to you off air here in just a second. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to it, and this was a lot of fun, and I've got to build some of these caches that really rock.
Yeah, I have an idea already, so I already mentioned it, but I'm going to see if I can make that work. Again, if anybody builds one of these, make sure you send us a picture of it at the Gadget Talk Podcast at gmail.com email, and we'll post it on our Instagram, our Facebook page, and then we'll put out the geocache code if you give it, and see if we can kind of promote it a little bit for you.
Yep. So,
yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. It was a great show.
Yes, thank you. And everybody, we will see you later in the month for that build.
All right.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.